Mr. Mr. Pelay began his career at the Florida International University and received his bachelor's in communication and organizational leadership at Trinity International University. He later served as the president and owner of the Southern Marine Finance Corporation for 5 years, where he directed sales, operations, and marketing. Since 2000, he's been working at ADP, serving the position of team leader, senior information consultant, and learning consultant. For the past 4 years, he has served as a performance consultant of leadership and organizational effectiveness. Welcome, Mr. Pelay. We're looking forward to your presentation, and thank you for joining us today.
Mr. Pelay, we can't hear you.
Nope, sorry about that. My own pet peeve. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. It's good to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for just giving me the space and the platform to partner with you all with Student Leadership Johns Creek and facilitate this program for you. So I know that, I don't know how long into the new year you can say this, but I've always heard that until you see that person, you can still say it. So Happy New Year to all of you. Right? And go Dogs, right? For the Dogs fans out there. And for me and Irene as Saints fans, Sunday was our playoffs. I think we're very happy with what happened on Sunday. So we are riding a high for sure. Well, it's good to be back with all of you. As we get started today, this is part 2 of your Student Leadership Challenge program. And so I'm going to share my slides with you in just a moment. And as we get into today's session, this is really kind of part 2 of what you were introduced to back in, I think, October. So this is kind of building that leadership conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Bear with me just a second here. And let me know if you can see it. Give me a thumbs up. Okay. Leadership challenge that we're getting into today. And as we get started, just want to go through a quick agenda with you. We'll be together from 8:30 to about 10:30 or so, 10:45, maybe a little bit earlier than that. And then you have another speaker coming in a little bit later this morning. So we're going to talk first about what's new in leadership. And the idea behind that is really to kind of hear from you a little bit as to your own growth over the past couple of months. How have you learned, or what have you learned about leadership? Maybe things that you took away from the first session that maybe resonated with you, right? So that's kind of a little bit of a recap orientation, an opportunity for you to share. Then I want to do a little bit of a recap for you, just kind of go over the 5 leadership practices that we introduced to you back in October, talk to you a little bit about that. And then today we're going to dive into the 3 other practices of leadership that research has identified that the best leaders do. And they're called practices for a reason, because they're meant to be practiced. And what I love about this framework, as I probably shared with you before, is it's very practical, it's relevant. You can see it in everyday life. If you just simply look around long enough, you'll see these practices either happening or the absence of them. And so that's what I like about them. I also use this particular framework with leaders at all levels, from CEOs of corporations to emerging leaders to all of you in this program. I have found this framework to be relevant and applicable. And I think if you really apply these practices, they can make a difference in your life, not only professionally as you go through your career in the future, but even personally, because I really believe that leadership starts at the personal level. Would you agree? Right? Leadership starts with you, and leadership starts with me. It's leadership at that one-on-one level. And as Barry Posner, the author of the book, says, that as a leader, the very first person has to follow you is who? Put that out in the chat there. Who's the very first person has to follow you? Yeah. Great point, right? And so you have to ask yourself constantly as a leader, and as you continue to grow in your life, right, are you a leader worth following? Why would you follow yourself? A great question that I like to ask myself periodically that I heard from another leader a long time ago is this: what's it like to be on the other side of me? So what's it like to be on the other side of me? As you work with me, as we are in a team together, in a project together, what's it like to be on the other side of me? And that's a very humbling question but it's one that if you could kind of commit that question to memory, it'll keep you humble as a leader because it'll keep you authentic. And one of the best things that you can do right now as a leader in every sphere of life is to be an authentic leader, right? You may not be the most charismatic, but guess what? Charisma is not what makes leadership. In fact, what they've shown is that some of the best leaders are actually introverts. So it has nothing to do with extroversion or introversion or charisma or not, but what people are drawn to is authenticity. And if you can keep that humble approach in your leadership, no matter how successful you become in your field, in the competencies that you have, but as a leader, keep that humility of asking yourself consistently, what's it like to be on the other side of me? Would I follow me? You know, am I a leader worth following? Would I follow myself? Those are all questions that should constantly be sort of circulating in our minds. So today we're going to look at 3 other practices. Challenge the process, which is all about innovation and looking from things from the outside in perspective, looking at the bigger picture of things, taking that step back to not always look down at the work you're doing, but to look up and look around to see what else is happening around you. We'll talk about that, and that's where innovation comes from. The best leaders also enable others to act. We'll talk about the importance of leaders understanding that, yes, leadership starts with you, but it doesn't end with you. Leadership is a continuum. It is a journey with others. And if you are think you're leading people and you turn around and nobody's following you, well, as some authors have said, then you're just out for a walk in the park. So as a leader, you always have to ask yourself, who's following me? And not following you from a cult-like perspective, right? But following you, people that choose to follow you because they appreciate you, they believe in you, they believe in what you're trying to do, they want to support you in that regard. So they are kind of co-leaders with you, but they're following you, right? So how are we empowering those around us? How are we enabling those around us? The best leaders are constantly giving away their power, giving away resources, helping others to become better versions of themselves. And finally, the best leaders also know that you have to encourage the heart. And that is, it may sound a little bit touchy feely. We'll talk about that a little bit to make a difference. Would you agree? Let me hear from you in the chat. Why is encourage the heart important to you? When you feel recognized or valued, some of you actually have jobs, or maybe you don't have a job, but you've been on a team. What does that do for you? How do you feel when people recognize you, encourage you, make you feel valued? What comes to mind for you? Love it. So proud, motivated, makes you want to do more. So kind of not an ulterior motive, but you know, you want performance to go up. Guess what? Take care of people, and they're going to perform better for you. Now, that's not why you should do it, but it's sort of the payoff for it in a way. People will actually do more. Yeah, I love that, Brian. Validate your effort. Absolutely. Makes you feel proud, Alicia. Certainly. All great points. It makes you want to keep going. So it motivates you even when there's a struggle. And sometimes the struggle is real, right? So things are happening. Sometimes you encounter a roadblock, but because you feel like, you know, you're motivated, you want to keep pushing forward. And that's exactly what the best leaders do. Great call outs there. So with that, also at the end today, I want you to be thinking about what are you going to do to activate your leadership? And I put activating because it's present tense. It should always be happening. And so I hope you've taken some lessons from the last time we got together, but I hope this will just add more to your development as a leader and that you will continue to intentionally work on your leadership. It is a practice, and I'll reiterate that several times throughout our session today. Now, some rules for success for us today. I hate that we can't be in person, darn Omicron, but at least we're going to make the best of it in this virtual environment. And so we've done this virtually before, and it's been very successful. It's not my favorite. I prefer to be all in the same room with you and seeing you in person, but we're going to make it work, right? Okay, so a couple rules for success. Be present. What do you think I mean by being present? Anybody in the chat? What do you think I mean there? And you can also unmute your phone and share audibly. What do you think by being present? Yeah, actively participate. Actually pay attention. Yeah, put down the Candy Crush, put down the TikTok. Any distractions, right, should not be anywhere around you. That's right. So being present, being engaged, answering questions, all the things that you're doing already, right? The good things that you're doing already. So being present, that means that you're focused on this time here together. Participate actively, and that means certainly taking notes. It means sharing your thoughts. It means answering questions when called upon, or just in general. Taking notes certainly is about just writing things down, because what they've found through the research is that when you take notes, you're much more apt to do it. Now, notes could be physically written down or maybe digitally, whatever you prefer, whatever is easier and faster for you. But take notes. As you go through this is going to hit you all a little bit different, right? So for some of you, you're going to have one takeaway that may be different than somebody else. That's okay. This is your learning experience. So take some notes, because that's going to help it really add to application for you later on. And then at the end of our session today, when we start to talk about what are you going to do to take this forward, you can go back and review your notes, and that's going to help you identify a commitment and a plan of action. And finally, have fun. Have fun. So have fun, because when you have fun physiologically, does anybody know what happens when you have fun? What happens is physiologically when we have fun. What happens in our bodies, in our brain? Definitely become more invested, sure. That's right, dopamine, right? So it releases some of those endorphins. So you actually feel better. You actually feel better. And so have fun. And I'll tell you, as a leader, that is something that you are absolutely responsible for, is to create an environment of fun. And by the way, I know as a young person, you probably roll your eyes when you hear that a company feels that they're fun because they've got a ping pong table, right? Or they've got a video game in the break room. That's passe. That's not fun. That's kind of patronizing in a way. Like, it's not bad to have those perks, but that's not what makes a workplace fun. What makes a workplace or a team environment fun is the culture. And that culture starts with everybody, but it starts with the leader. So as a leader, have fun. Create environments where people have fun. Poke fun at yourself periodically, right? Create environments where people can laugh. That really releases endorphins that make people productive, right? They're more all powerful things. You should have fun as we go through the session today. All right, so what's new in leadership? I'd like to hear from you a little bit here using the chat panel. As you think back to October, when you were first introduced to this framework of the Student Leadership Challenge and the 5 practices of exemplary leadership, what have you learned about your leadership journey over the past few months? So using the chat, kind of share with us, what are some things that you took away from that session, or things that you learned about yourself and leadership, anything that you've really grown in an area of leadership, or that you've taken away? Just kind of a broad question here to kind of get us started. Love that, Riley. Absolutely. That gives you a lot of freedom, right? You can do it differently. It takes all kinds. That's where that creativity and that fun comes in also, because it can look differently for every person. Wonderful. What else? Yeah, it's good to be confident. Absolutely. And confident, by the way, is not arrogance. Confident is just you're confident in your abilities, but you're also humble to continue to learn and to be aware that you don't know it all, right? Yeah, teamwork, critical. Accept dissent. Yeah, not everyone's going to agree with you. And in fact, you want people around you that are not going to agree with you, because that's where the good ideas come from, is that diversity of experiences, the diversity of thoughts, and of course, the basics, diversity of backgrounds. I mean, that's all important. Faith, absolutely, all different personalities can be leaders. There's such a beautiful thing there, because it's a mosaic of leadership, and it takes all kinds. Yeah, communication, absolutely. People want to be heard. I love how those kind of are connected. Certainly. One of the best gifts you can give is the gift of listening to those around you. So if you're a leader, you need to do more listening and less talking. We need to be curious, and we're going to show you that a little bit later today. All right, I know we got like 38 people out there, so what else? What else? What else did you learn about your leadership, or what's been your journey over the past few months? Yeah, people compliment, right? Absolutely, people want to know that they're doing well, and that's one way for people to feel heard. To kind of build on Nikhil's comment there, right? Is that when you let people know they're doing well, they feel like they've been heard, they're being seen. Yeah, criticism and compliments, right? Is that feedback is so powerful for leaders. Luke, great point. Yeah, we don't say, well, leadership starts, from 8 to 5 or whatever the time zone is that I work in. Leadership is in all areas of your life. I mean, and if you really become a student of leadership, and you are leaders, right? If you're in this program, then look at everything through that leadership lens that you do. Every time you look around you, there's leadership happening. Yeah, we learned about strengths, right? Also, we talked about strengths a bit too, which is, again, understanding where people are and understanding the strengths of the team, which means that I don't have to have it all. And that should give me freedom. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. When we talk about enabling others to act, is that sometimes most times the people on my team are going to have strengths and abilities and even competencies that I don't have. And that's okay. I don't need to be the smartest person on the team to be the leader. Love that, Purvi. Yeah, the path, absolutely, because you are leading people to a destination, but it is that process. And as a leader, trusting that process as you're going there and enjoying that process and all the growth that happens throughout that. It is a marathon, right? And just like in a marathon, every few miles, somebody's stopping to give you encouragement or give you nutrition or whatever that might be. You're enjoying the process as you're going through those milestones. You're learning about yourself and about others as you go through that process. All right, great points, everyone. Thank you for sharing that. Continue to seek that curiosity always in your leadership. That is absolutely key. And remember, we talked last time about 2 practices. So let's take a look at the what of leadership. Now, this is a little bit of a refresher. These are items that are really important in terms of what leadership is. So leadership really is everyone's business. We talked a little bit about that already. Leadership is a relationship. So you're not leading by yourself, you're leading in context of others. And so leading in a relationship is very important. Leadership is self-development, so you never stop to grow or develop. It is not a box you check and say, okay, I'm done, I'm complete. The best leaders are constantly developing themselves. It is learned, so leadership can be learned. Are some people born leaders? Well, some people might be born with certain skills or abilities, but that doesn't make them a leader if they don't develop it. So leadership can be learned. It takes deliberate practice, and that's why the authors of this program called it the 5 practices of exemplary leadership. And they purposely chose the word practice because practice makes permanent, not perfect. You're going to make mistakes when you have practice, right? But it makes it permanent. So the best leaders have a discipline of leadership. They actively work at it. They don't take it for granted just because they become successful in their field. It's an inspiration and a choice. So yes, you can choose not to be a leader, but if you are set out to be a leader, it's going to constantly come back around. And ultimately, don't forget this, that leaders absolutely make a difference. You make a difference. And as a leader, it's being aware of what difference am I making and how am I making a difference in those around me. So Jim and Barry created this definition of leadership. I shared this with you last time. This is all a little bit of a review and a recap. But they identified leadership as the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. What about that definition stands out for you? And why art? Why, for some of you, that seems to be coming up a lot for a few of you. What is that? What about art resonates with you? And if anybody wants to share audibly and kind of explain their response a little bit further, feel free to do so. Just unmute your phone and just share.
I said it's like art because it's like a practiced skill that like sometimes you mess up, sometimes you do well.
With art, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it comes out, you're like, oh my God, this came out beautiful, and someone's like, ah, it didn't work out so well. But you're still enjoying that process, right? Awesome. Thanks, Cindy. All right, somebody else want to share a little bit more about art? I see some comments coming through. It requires skill, and at the end, art is like a beautiful painting. Absolutely comes together. Yeah, Varsha, spot on, right? Is that, they say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So is an abstract, right? Is, you know, what kind of art is it? And, you know, some people might really appreciate it, others might not, but that's okay. It's subjective. And so it takes all kinds and it takes all approaches. And you're not always going to reach everybody. You know, you're not always going to reach everybody. And that's where flexibility is also important. And that's where curiosity is important as a leader, understanding where people are coming from. What do they need from you? It's not changing who you are. You're still who you are, but it is meeting people where they are. And I think about specific things like communication styles. Like I have my communication preference, but if I'm working with somebody, I'm their leader, I shouldn't try to impose my preference on them. I should find out what their preference is and then meet them where they are, because ultimately I'm trying to lead them. I know where I'm going. I'm trying to get them on board. So the best way to get them on board is to meet them where they are. All right, fantastic. So these are the 5 practices, just as a quick recap here of the leadership principles that we were talking about. And today we're going to focus on challenging the process, enabling others to act, and recognition, encouraging the heart. But last time we met, we talked about modeling the way, which is all about credibility. And we talked about knowing your values and having clarity about your values and making sure that your values align with what you do and that you are doing what you say you're going to do and all those things. Remember, you selected your values last time. So that's an area that if you've forgotten to go back to, you took pictures of your values and you wrote those down. Go back to those periodically. You might want to go back and review those and find out, how are you living your values? Are they really true to you? I would say that every year you should sit down and look at your values and understand what's important to you and clarify and continue to define your values, because they may change over time, and that's okay as long as you are in line with them. Secondly, we looked at inspiring a shared vision, which is all about direction, knowing where you're going. Without a clear picture of where you're going, it's going to be very hard to get there. So that's really important for yourself, but also for those that you lead. They're looking to you for inspiration, but people are looking to you for direction. They want to know that you know where you're going. So before we move on to the next 3, which is we're going to focus our time today, anybody have any questions or additional thoughts about the first 2 practices? All right, I don't see anything coming through, so I'll give it a second to pause here. All right, so let's move on then. If something pops up, I'll refer back to in just a moment. So ignore the workbook pages here. These are not correct, but when you came through the last session or prior to that, you did your what's called a self-leadership practices inventory, which is basically the behavioral analysis that shows us how often we're engaging in the behaviors that support these practices of leadership, with 1 being rarely do I do that, to 5 being very frequently. And all it measured for you is how frequently you engage in the leadership behaviors that support the 5 leadership practices. And the reason why it's important to refer back to that LPI is it gives you an opportunity to see where are you engaging more often and where do you have an opportunity to be more intentional in your leadership behaviors and practices. So let's jump into our first of the 3 practices for today, challenge the process. Now, I mentioned earlier that challenge the process is all about innovation. It's about seeking the outside in perspective. And each of the practices has 2 commitments that we make in order to be effective as a leader. So as a leader, when you challenge the process, there are 2 commitments you make. The first one, if I have a volunteer to read that out loud for us. Whoever unmutes first and goes. Okay, Aya, go ahead. Ava, go ahead, sorry.
Search for opportunities by seizing the initiative and by looking outward for innovative ways to improve.
Okay, thanks, Ava. All right, so can somebody tell me what does that mean to you? And don't tell me verbatim, seizing the initiative and looking outward. What does that mean? What's another way to define that?
Maybe by like taking risk, and when there's like an opportunity, a good opportunity that like comes forth to you, don't be scared to take that opportunity because it can lead you to a better and new path.
Excellent, well said. Absolutely, thank you, Eva. What would you have to do as a leader to be searching for opportunities? Yeah, Dorothy, putting yourself out there and taking chances for sure. Yeah. trying to find things that people want fixed. So being aware of like what's broken, what needs to be better, what could be better. You got to push yourself, Nicholas. Absolutely. Great points. And so it sounds to me like what you're saying is that a leader has to be aware. Would that be fair? Like they have to be aware. They have to constantly be sort of scanning the environment, seeing what's out there. And that's one of the things you're going to face in your career is the term leadership versus management. I'm a manager, but I may not be a leader. But not all leaders are managers. However, all managers should be leaders. Okay, so let me say it again. Not every leader is a manager. Some leaders don't manage anything, they just lead. Not all managers are leaders. However, all managers should be leaders because management is about doing the day-to-day stuff. It's task focused. In fact, the word manage comes from the Latin root manos, which is about hands-on. It's where you get things like hands-on management. It's where you hear terms like, my favorite person that I worked with was the one that they got their hands dirty. They raised their sleeves. They joined us in the trenches. All those terminologies that we use, right? They were hands-on. That comes from that root word. So management is about doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually very important. But management is more about the day-to-day. And as I manage, I'm going to be heads down, focusing on a task or project or people. But the temptation is by looking down and working, I might not look up, look around and see what's happening. So that's the balance there. And the word leadership, by the way, if you're curious, if you go back and study the root word of leadership, it's about taking people on a journey. So it's about moving forward. So you can't take people forward on a journey if you're heads down, looking down. So you have to balance that. And in your career, as you grow, you're going to feel a tension sometimes between managing, which is doing the day-to-day, and leading, which is sort of the looking forward. But you have to find that balance for you. It's not a 50-50 balance. It's just an awareness of me. Who can volunteer for us on that one?
I can do it.
Okay, go ahead, Puri. Yeah.
So experiment and take risks by constantly generating small wins and learning from experience.
All right, thank you. All right, can somebody tell me, what does that mean? What's that all about? What's another way to say that? Okay, Tia?
Instead of just focusing on the big final picture, focus on each individual step in step because there may be mistakes or changes along the way that affect what the final product actually is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you think about generating small wins as you work on those small things, what does that do?
It builds energy sort of and like makes the people in the team, or if you're just by yourself, just work harder for the next step.
Absolutely. And when you do that, you're doing two things. One is you're identifying if this is going to work or not. Like you're kind of, instead of committing full on, like Tia said, to the whole thing, you're doing something sort of in stages, right? The second thing though is you are doing exactly that. You're building some motivation. So if you had people that weren't on board with this change, or people that were a little bit nervous about this change, which is perfectly understandable, by generating the small wins, you're building that motivation and you're getting people on board with what you're trying to do. So always remember that you may have a grandiose idea, which is fantastic. That's why you're a leader. However, how can I break that into smaller steps? Number one, because I want to make sure it's the right thing for us to do. And one of the things that's so hard about leaders sometimes is when they have their mind set on something, is to change directions, especially when other things come to light that maybe there's not the direction that you need to move on. That's where a lot of humility comes in, because if I'm very arrogant and prideful, then I may continue pushing that direction, even knowing that that's not the direction we need to be going in. It's okay as a leader to say, you know what, we need to switch directions. We've gotten more information that this is not the right path for us. And that's okay too. But generating wins, learning from experience, it builds motivation. So those are two commitments that you make to challenging the process. Oops. So challenge the process isn't about change for the sake of change. Somebody tell me what about that stands out for you. What does that mean? Challenging the process isn't about change for the sake of change.
I think that means like you shouldn't just be changing stuff just because you want to change something, just so that you can leave your imprint as a leader saying, I changed X, Y, and Z, but rather there should be actually a purpose behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are leaders that sometimes take over a team and they will change everything just because they feel like you have to change everything because they're the leader now. And that's just so wrong. What if the was there before wasn't broken necessarily? So there has to be a reason for the change. And one of the things that I would encourage you there is if you start to lead anything new, let's say how many of you by show of hands are working today, or not today, but you work right now while you're in school? Right, quite a few of you, right? Okay. So one of the things I would tell you to consider here is when you think about working, let's say you get promoted, you become the shift leader, right? Or you become a team leader in something that you're doing within a place you work, or at school, something that you lead, is don't make any major changes right away. Don't make any major changes right away. Now, there's something really broken that's, money's being drained or people are leaving or, some moral failure, then of course you need to make changes pretty quickly and stop the leak, so to speak. But if they're just things that you're just not sure about, don't have to go in and rush and make changes until you really have a good understanding of what's going on. Because people need to first earn your trust and earn, you need to earn their credibility, right? That they're going to follow you. And so be careful with making change or change for the sake of change. And that can also be very tiring to the people that are around you. I know leaders that are constantly changing things, and that leads to something we call change fatigue. Change fatigue. And that's where people are just tired because this leader is constantly changing things. And part of the reason why leaders are constantly changing things is when they don't have a clear direction vision of where they're going. Now, sometimes the environment forces you to change. That's a reality. Obviously, we know in the pandemic, things change, literally overnight sometimes. And we had to be very nimble. And it's been a good lesson learned. But it's important. So that's like, it is about status quo questioning. So one of the most dangerous phrases in the English language is, it's just the way we've always
done it.
That's right. Just the way we've always done it. How many of you have heard that before? Oh, that's just the way we do it here, or just the way we've always done it, right? Yeah. I actually have said that a few times. Sometimes I've said that to justify my actions. Well, that's just the way we've always done it, and somebody questions a process. So it's natural to do that because change for a lot of people is scary. Change is about the unknown, right? So some people embrace change, some people resist change, but change is always going to be a change, right? There's always something that's going to be different. And so there's always a little bit of apprehension or fear. But notice here that challenging the process is the leader's mandate. It's what you and I as leaders are meant to do and called to do, is to question things. But again, not questioning for the sake of questioning. It's questioning with the right intention of wanting to make things better because I've identified that something has to be better, because something's not working. So I have to always check my intentions at the door. I always have to check my intentions and understand, why am I questioning this? Is it because of pride? Is it because it's the former leader that did this and I just want to change things? Or is it because I really feel that we need to make things better, or we don't know why we're doing it? And all I keep hearing is it's just the way we've always done it. And that's not a good reason to keep doing something. So we constantly want to change things. So where do good ideas come from? Well, they come from everywhere. Let's talk about some examples of organizations that have actually birthed new products or industries even because these leaders, these individuals were willing to question the status quo. They were not happy with accepting it's just the way we've always done it. So this first icon that you see on your screen, what company is that? Uber, yes. Okay. So let me ask you, before Uber, what were the options of getting from point A to point B? If you needed to get somewhere, how would you get there? The taxi, right? What else? Maybe some public transportation, train, bus, carpool, walking. Yeah, the old school method of walking, bringing you back original. Biking there, maybe borrowing someone's vehicle, hailing somebody to take you somewhere, right? Absolutely. So you could have said that for many, many years, that was the way we've always done it, right? For many years, in fact, if you had mentioned, hey, couldn't there be a car service where you could pay somebody to take you from point A to point B, they'd be like, yeah, it exists already, it's a taxi. So think about that. This industry is not that old, the Uber industry. And they really were birthed out of a necessity to say, hey, there's gotta be a different way. Why is it that the only option out there are trains and buses and taxis? And in my mind, you would think like that's pretty exhaustive already. But because of that curiosity, they said there's got to be a different way. And now you have Uber, you have Lyft, right? You have all these other car service out there companies. Guess what? Taxis are still in business. So yes, they were affected, but they're not completely closed out, because I still use taxis periodically in certain cities I go to. So again, perfect example of an idea that was birthed out of, it can't always be done this way. What about this next icon that you see on the screen here? Airbnb, yes. It's kind of the same format, right? Prior to Airbnbs, if you wanted to stay somewhere, you wanted to go on vacation, you were traveling, visiting a friend in another city or state, you had a hotel to stay in, you had maybe a motel, maybe you had a camper, maybe you would call a friend and say, hey, can I crash on your couch for the week? Those were the options. And for years, those were the only what? Were the only options. So here came two individuals that said there's got to be a better way and a different way. And if you go back and study the story of Airbnb, I believe the two leaders were in San Francisco. There was a big conference coming to town. People were looking for places to stay, and they decided to rent out rooms in their home for this conference. And that's where that idea was birthed. And so it's just amazing to me that these two companies were formed out of things that we've always known for years were just the way we've always done them. But it took an individual, it took individuals to be willing to ask, why are we doing it this way? Is there a better way? Is there a different way? Is the Frappuccino, even though I'm more of a hot coffee drinker type person, but the Frappuccino is good too. How many of you like Frappuccinos? All right. So anybody know the story of Frappuccino? Does anybody know how it came to be? So sometimes we think that good ideas come just from leaders, but that's not always the case. In fact, the best leaders create environments where good ideas can come from anybody in the organization, even the front line. In fact, one of the leaders that I track with, he says this: the front line determines the bottom line. The front line determines the bottom line. So we have to be aware that when you're a leader, you can't be all places at once, right? So how do you empower your team to constantly be aware of what's going on around them? Because they're often most close to the product or to the customer or to the person they're trying to serve in the industry that you're part of. So always remember that as you continue to grow your leadership, is that you don't have to be the good idea person. What you do have to be as the leader that creates the environment. People are questioning, why are we doing things the way we were doing them? And if the reasons are just because it's the way we've always done them, then let's shake that up a little bit. Let's question that. So the Frappuccino, there was a manager in California, and she was facing two problems in her market. One is, what's the weather like in Southern California, by the way, typically? It's warm, right? Hot? So guess what? Coffee sales in the morning were strong, but coffee sales in the afternoon started to slump a little bit, because in the afternoon it's hot. People are not up for coffee as much. Not me, I'll drink coffee all the time. But not everybody, right? So they noticed that afternoon store sales would start to decline a little bit. Number two, how many of you by show of hands are not coffee drinkers? Show of hands. How many of you do not drink coffee? All right, one. Let's see who else. Not a coffee drinker. I got a lot of coffee drinkers in here. You're my people. All right, now we got 3 or 4 people. Okay, a little bit better, bigger numbers there. All right, but guess what? Not everybody's a coffee drinker, right? I don't understand it, but not everybody's a coffee drinker. So guess what? She says, hey, we're not meeting a certain market share, right? We're not serving a part of our community that doesn't drink coffee. So she's like, what else could we do? So let me ask you, where can you get good ideas from? Where do good ideas come from? Where could you go to get good ideas? Your consumers, your customers? Yeah, you can ask your customers, hey, what do you think we should be doing? Where else? So your employees, right? Asking them, hey, what are some of the pain points that you have? What are some of the challenges you're seeing? What are some of the things that are broken from your perspective or things that we could do better? Coworkers, for sure. Where else can you go for good ideas? And I know the answer is everywhere, but I really want us to be thinking about where could we go for more ideas? Yeah, your own experience. So certainly never hesitate to tap into your own experience, what you've seen, what you're familiar with, what you know. Where else can you go for good ideas? I want you to think broadly. Social media, for sure. On the web. Remember, as a leader, you're up and looking around. Where else could you go? What about other industries that have nothing to do with your industry? Could you learn something from other industries? So for example, maybe you're not Google, but Google does a great job of managing data and you know, taking care of data. And maybe in your company, data is important, but you're not a data company, but data is important to you. So you could say, you know what, how does Google manage all this data that they have? What best practice could we learn? Or let me ask you, what are some companies that you believe do good service that come to mind? What are some companies that you're a customer of, that you're a fan of, a follower of, that you believe they do a great job with either their products or their services? All right, so Chick-fil-A, yeah, okay. A lot of people say that comes to mind. So maybe you decide that you're going to open up some kind of business one day, and you know, it's not a restaurant, but it's a business. But you love the service model from Chick-fil-A. Could you take some of those principles and apply them to your business? Even though you're not in the trends from other industries, also even from your competition. So back to the story. So this manager, guess where she got the idea from? There was a local coffee shop that they were doing blended frozen drinks. And she thought to herself, wow, that's a great idea, blended frozen drinks. So we should also be doing blended frozen drinks. It's a way to A, take care of the afternoon slump where people want something cool to drink, and B, reach those non-coffee drinkers as well. And so she started doing research around that. By the way, the short of the story is at first, the leadership at Starbucks said, no, we're not interested. It's not in our business model. And that's understandable. Sometimes people are not going to buy into your ideas, but she kept at it, and she found a liaison in the leadership at Starbucks that would be an advocate for her. And they said, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? We buy a couple blenders and it doesn't work out. What's the worst that can happen? You're out of a couple blenders. That's the worst that can happen. It doesn't work. Big deal. It's not like we're going out and starting a whole new industry and spending millions of dollars. We're just testing something out. And so that's exactly what they did, and the rest is history. Now, I don't know if they compensated her for the idea. I hope they did. I hope they gave her a share of sales. I hope they gave her a big promotion, a big bonus. I hope they took care of her. But to me, I love that this is an idea that did not come from the senior leaders. It came from the front line. Came from the front line. Good deal, right? All right, so where do good ideas come from? They come from everywhere, but we have to be willing to be open. We have to be willing to look around. We have to be willing to ask questions. We have to be humble enough to understand that we don't have all the answers ourselves. And so what this takes is a skill called outsight. Outsight. Now, all of us have insight. Somebody said earlier, your own experience. Your own experience is insight, and that's valuable. Outsight is using other people's insights. So it's outsight because it's outside of me. So outsight is using other people's insights, experiences, perspectives, expertise, and also even using some people's failures. So if I see a company that did something wrong, what can I learn from that? And maybe I can take their mistake and maybe make it a success for me and my organization. So we are going to practice using outsight now. Ambassadors, I need you to start getting ready to put our folks into breakout rooms. So I would say We have about 50 participants or so. So you guys can help me break them in groups of maybe, groups of like 6 to 7, I'd say, something like that. Not too much bigger than that, if that works out. And what we're going to do is you're going to get into some breakout groups here in just a moment. And in this breakout room, and let me just show you these behaviors real quick. When you challenge a process, you're constantly looking for ways to develop and challenge your skills and abilities. You're constantly looking for innovative ways to improve what you're doing. You take the initiative in experimenting with the way things can be done. You make sure that we break projects into smaller steps, so it's part of challenging the process. You look for ways that others can try out new ideas and methods. It doesn't always have to be you. And really important in challenging the process, and we'll get back to this later, is that when things don't go as expected, when mistakes are made, I ask, what can we learn from this experience? And so this last behavior here, I need somebody to hold me accountable. When we come back from our activity, I want to revisit that last behavior there. So can somebody volunteer to hold me accountable to touch that point when we come back? Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take about 15 minutes now in our breakout groups. And in your groups, I want you to identify as a group, what is something that can be done differently? Think about a current process, maybe at school or an organization or a business or product or service that you use. It can be outside of what you're involved in daily. And as a group, I want you to discuss, well, what would you do differently? Now, when it comes to challenging the process, you don't always have to have the new product or solution. That doesn't happen overnight. But just think about things that you think are pain points today that you think could be done better or differently. What might you do differently? What might you do to change that? And I want you to just create a 2 to 3 minute summary of your ideas. Nothing too long, nothing too flashy. In fact, if you're going to put a presentation together, I'd say no more than 1 slide. You don't have to have something visual back to present. It could be just one person on your team being the spokesperson, but everybody in your group has to actively participate. So everybody in your group has to actively participate. When you get into your breakout rooms, one person has to serve as sort of the leader of that group to lead the conversation, discussion, but every single person has to participate in some way during your breakout. Use good judgment. Remember your student code of conduct. We're going to put you in the breakout rooms for exactly 15 minutes. So that puts us back here to get into our breakouts. Perfect. And then before we break into groups here, what questions do you have about this activity? Wait to see if any questions show up here. You can also audibly unmute and share any questions you have. All right, and one thing that I'll say that will really help you is think about places where you've said, you've heard, we've always done it this way. Think about anything out there that you feel that this is the phrase as to why they keep doing it. We've always done it this way. Maybe there's something recent where you've questioned it and somebody's even told you, nope, it's just the way we do it. So anything like that. It can be broad, or it can be just something that's happening at school or part of an organization you're a part of or a product or service. So think about anything like that and as a group get together to discuss. All right, so we're ready? All right, folks, we'll see you back at 9:35. Thank you, everyone.
Does everyone see a message that says that they will be in their room soon?
No.
No, I don't see it.
Yeah, I think you have to hit open all rooms.
Did, and then all the rooms are open, but
Okay.
it's asking me to, it just has a list of everybody. It says not join, so.
I think you have to like maybe individually move that to the breakout. Just try it.
Wait, Tia, let me try on my computer. See if it's any better. Oh yeah, okay.
Megan, Reagan, I think you still need to join your group.
Yeah, a couple of them aren't there in their groups yet.
Yeah, it looks like it's just the two. I think you had to accept when it asked you to join the group. I think you had to hit accept or something.
Yeah. They may have stepped away for a bit. I think it's going good though.
I'm assign.
I'm sorry. Oh, actually, you know what? Never mind. Sorry, I got kicked out and I had to come back in, but I just received like a invite to join another breakout room.
Okay.
Thanks, Brady.
All right.
Yeah, I saw Brady's name pop up and I just assigned him to a group.
Okay, I think I did too.
But Megan and Regan,
Yeah,
they are in a group.
I'm wondering where they are.
Haven't joined. Okay. Yeah. I love Zoom's breakout features much better than WebEx's feature. Yeah, so that's all it is. They just need to click on join. But no, I think it's going well as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where Reagan is and Mega. They must have stepped away. That's all I can think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I wasn't going to
good.
go break since I'm really only for 2 hours. Okay.
And also, are you going to talk about the movie thing or at the end?
Yeah, that's why I found the clip to just play as an example. I
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
sure you wanted me to play the clip today or the clip on February 11th. On February 11th, I'll still start with a little bit of introduction with a video myself, but this will be just kind of a teaser.
Yeah, and then they can. Where did Randy go? Did she go into one of the rooms? She must have.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
She usually does.
Did you, now you're going to send the email out to the group though, the communication?
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had any other directions that you wanted to send me before I sent that out.
I copied kind of what you did and I put that on a PowerPoint slide for the end. I thought that was very clear.
Okay, good. And I'm just going to use that same Harry Potter one, you know.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah.
Movies direction. Yeah, we came, what was that? We came up with a, I've been working on doing a, like a scholarship for one of the kids in the graduating class. That was last year's first year class that you did. And so I came up with this application. So we're going to call it the Michael E. Bodker.
Nice.
Let me.
All right, welcome back everyone. So we are going to get ready here to hear from the groups. Ambassadors, how many groups do we have total? I think we had 7.
I think it was 7, yes.
Okay, so everybody that's in a group, if you were the leader of your group, it doesn't mean you have to present, but if you could put your name out there in the chat so we can call on your group when it's time to present back. So tell us what your group number you were in and your name.
Okay, so I see Riley was group 3, Sophia was group 1.
Okay, that's okay, Rishi, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so tell us if you were the group leader. Tia, yeah, group 7. That's okay, Archana, no problem. We're missing 1 and 7. There we go. Okay. Oh, no, Rishi. Okay, so we're missing one group leader to speak up. Okay, Bobbin. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's go this way. So let's just kind of go in order. So Sophia, if you could go ahead and go first. Again, it's not that you have to speak for your group, but you are just your group leader. Let us know. And who's going to present. And again, it could be just speaking points or somebody, you may have created a visual And ambassadors, do they need any special rights to share?
Unless they have a presentation that they want to put up, I think they need ability to share that, but otherwise I don't think so.
Okay, so Sophia, let us know.
Yeah, we didn't make a presentation. So
Fine.
our group was thinking that something like that's kind of arbitrary and it's just in place because that's the way things are done was like the 5-day week or like school week for us. So we were thinking to like reduce it to a 4-day week. And this idea, well, it's not like totally new. And I guess the main objection is that it would be like less productive for students because they would have an extra day off. But we were thinking that what you're saying, make sure that students are still on track and they are actually making like more progress compared to a 5-day week. It might be feasible because we were thinking that like a 5-day week is just too tiring, and sometimes if you have more time to rest or like review your assignments and classwork, it might actually help you be more productive. And the other thing about having like an extra day off is that it would be more flexible and accommodate more students like extracurricular schedule. So that was like the general premise. So if anyone else wants to add something, they can.
All right, so anybody, thank you, Sophia. Anybody else from group one want to share anything else about that idea that you all had? All right. So I'll tell you what, I love that idea, Sophia, and my job's not to evaluate the ideas, but I just wanted to share. A lot of employers, a lot of companies have also moved to a 4-day work week. They've found that people are more productive, people feel more engaged because they have more flexibility. Obviously there are other things that would have to be looked at for something like that in terms of the learning experience for the learner and so forth. But I think that's a great idea, right? And that's exactly how new things are birthed. And yes, it's something that others I'm sure have looked at or talked about before, but I think it's definitely a great opportunity to think about, something that's always been done a certain way, and are we constantly questioning that to look for different ways and better ways to do things. All right, excellent. Group two. I don't think we had a group 2 number, so it might be Rishi or Bhavin. So I think that Rishi, so we're group 6. So Bhavin, can we go with you then? We'll just call you group 2.
Yeah, sure. So our group,
Okay, thank you.
we talked about the school lunch lines and how they're overwhelmingly long. So our solution to this was to split the lunches into four sections, A, B, C, and D. So our school recently just started this for the coming next 2 weeks because of the rise in COVID cases. But we thought implementing this idea would be beneficial because a lot of students who come to lunch and get their lunch can only eat it for like 5 minutes because the lines are so long. So splitting it into 4 different sections would allow them to have more time in lunch and actually get a break off from their day. And we also thought that this could also be implemented some way and somehow into other larger corporations which suffer from like long lines. We didn't discuss a way on how that would occur, but we thought that in some way or some fashion that could happen. And then we had a lot of other issues, but another one was like the quality of food in schools, and seniors, for example, they have the option in some schools to go outside and eat, but it hasn't really been instilled in the school. So we thought like having Fridays as a way for seniors to go out of campus and eat, or bringing in some other food from a restaurant per se, would allow for like more interaction and maybe even raise funds for the school. But yeah, those were the two main issues that we talked about.
Yeah, awesome, love it. And when you think about, so right now your school is going into that four group module for the next couple of weeks because of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so one of the things that's interesting and specific with the pandemic is organizations, at least in the business sector, have had to try new things, and that they've said, okay, we're going to do it just for this long because it's during COVID, right? Some companies have actually realized that those processes are actually better, and they've kept them sort of post-COVID, and have been working. And I think that's a great thing. So you never know. Maybe because it shows that it can be done, right? So we've never done it this way, but look, we are able to do it now for the next couple of weeks. Perhaps they'll identify that there's value in keeping that longer term. So I would encourage you all to definitely voice that to your leadership at the school and your teachers and so forth, and ask them to consider, kind of during the pandemic, anytime I flew Delta Airlines, for years they've been telling the airlines to not board by group or by status, but rather to board from the back of the plane, front of the plane. And they've proven that that's actually a quicker way to board and all kinds of stuff. But because of people like me that we're so about our status, like people have fought that for many times. But the reality is, during the pandemic, I noticed that Delta started boarding from the back of the plane. And then they would let you, then they would do first class and the comfort and all those type of things and those statuses. And I thought it was so smooth. And even though I was not boarding as soon as I would have boarded under regular conditions, I found the boarding process to be much smoother as a result. And sadly, what I noticed is that, quote unquote, post-pandemic, they've gone back to the way they've always done it. So that's kind of a shame, because I think people, for the most part, really appreciated that. They were kind of forced to board that way, and it showed the value of it. So good, awesome. Anybody else from Balvin's group want to share anything else about the ideas that you guys talked about? And I love the idea of the school, the food options, maybe tying a benefit around something like it being a fundraiser for the school. All those local restaurants that often give you guys the school discount days where parents can go and it's the night for the school. There could be a way to incorporate that into the lunch items. Love that. All right, next group is group number 3, Riley.
Oops, sorry, my camera is not working right now. But so our group, we were talking about the national championship last night, Go Dogs. And we were thinking about this giant stadium, and how everyone has to get there, and the majority of people probably did drive there and parked either at the stadium or around the stadium. And just the process of getting out of stadiums for games, concerts, literally anything, it's just such a hassle, and there's so much traffic that is caused by it. So we thought that a great way to kind of reduce traffic is to kind of make it so that people have to leave in a more orderly fashion. So ways that we thought people could do that would be, if you would pay more for your ticket, that could either lead you to being able to leave faster, or you being able to park closer to the stadium itself. So then your certain group could either leave faster, and it would just be certain groups leaving at a certain time to reduce all of the mainstream traffic and to kind of cut it off into smaller groups, kind of like the lunch idea, where it's like rather than one long line, just split it up into sections. Everyone is eventually leaving or getting their food. It's just either taking a little bit longer or just in a different way to organize. And that would just reduce traffic leaving the stadium, which would put everyone in a much better mood. So that's our idea.
I like that, especially when we're losing and you're leaving, you're trying to get out there as quickly as possible, and you want to hear the taunts from the other team. I know I've been part of that before. I love that idea. Love it. All right, good deal.
This weekend I was at the Falcons Saints game, and I loved, as we left the stadium, a bunch of the Falcons fans were going, "Who dat? Who dat?" which made me feel happy as we were leaving. So they took on our chant.
That's awesome. I love that. That wasn't my experience when we lost one time to the Falcons. They were not letting us have it.
so they aren't, no.
No. I know we do the same thing to the Falcons fans when they go to the Dome, so. All right, next group. I think it's group number 4, Ava?
So our idea was maybe reinstating recess into middle school and high school because in my experience, high school, in the whole 4 years, you only take one physical class. So I was thinking that recess can help like relieve anxiety that high school students have, and it helps like students be physically active and be healthy. So that was what our idea was and our basis of it.
Love it. And there's been research to prove that, when you have, these sort of breaks with nothing planned around it, not only is it good physiologically, but it makes you think more creatively. It deals with stress. So I think that's a great idea. Safety and other things that are involved, but yeah, I think those are the type of things that it's interesting. It would be neat to study, like, why did they stop that, or that free time, right? Because I think it's important. Even working from home, like they've encouraged us to. It's so tempting to be at my desk the whole time working from home, whereas when I was in an office, you would stop and go to lunch, you'd stop and take a break, But working from home, you kind of get in, and before you know it, it's dark outside. And you're like, you're still at your desk, and sometimes I'll skip lunch. And so even forcing myself to say, okay, I'm going to go take a 30-minute break now. I'm going to go walk the dogs. I'm going to go outside, get some fresh air. And that completely changes your mindset when you come back in. So I love that, especially with all the stress that you guys are under and the pressures. That's awesome. Cool. All right, group number 5. I'm not sure if that was it was a group number or not, but Purvi, maybe it's your group.
Sure, I can go.
Okay.
So what we did was we were thinking about it in school, and we're thinking all of us have this sort of time, 30 minutes or 30 minutes, either flex hour, or at Northview we have Titan time. And personally, everyone in our group agreed that this period of time is kind of it's kind of an in-between thing where we're supposed to be doing work and being productive, but also like most of the time we're being like it's like we're not given the full capacity to be like having the most fun that we could have with our friends. So we were thinking instead we could shorten the school day in solution and give more people out of school the freedom to do what they want to do with this time. So if they were with their friends, they could have more fun with their friends, or if they wanted to work, they could be more productive with it. And also another idea that we thought was in general, like throughout the years, there's been 6 periods throughout the day, and like switching from class to class, from like information, going from like math to science immediately, and just having these 1-hour chunks of time where you're like cramming yourself with that information can be kind of stressful and like bombarding. So we were thinking that sometimes we could do block schedules with like 2 to 3 hours, just to give yourself a little bit more time to deal with that information.
Awesome. Purvi, I agree. I think education is a perfect example of one of those industries, or in one of those, I don't know what you want to call it, categories or what have you, that we have kind of done things the way we've always done them for a long time. And while there's some innovation there, it is one of the areas that I think lacks some of that. And some of that is just, the constructs around, why school is built the way it's built and so forth. But I do believe that that's an area that is just ripe for innovation, is looking at how people learn, how do adults learn, how do children learn, what's the best learning environment, are we structuring things in the right way, and I think that's an area that's constantly, and I know there's a lot of opinions on this and so forth, but I think certainly we haven't probably thought about, from the mindset of the learner, what's the best way for them to learn. Because you're right, you're switching 5, 6, 7 times a day, and you're going from one class to the other. It's a lot of information. People learn differently, and it can become very overwhelming. So, is there maybe a different way to approach it? And this is not that you're coming up with a full solution. It's just the ideation part of this, but it's so important. All right, Rishi, you're in the next group, I think, here.
Yeah, so we talked about how in all of our high schools, the hallways tend to get really congested. And this is a problem before COVID itself, because people be like hitting into each other's no personal space. And like even without COVID, it's still not nice to be like slammed up next to someone. And especially with COVID and Omicron, it's more important than ever that we have maintain as much social distancing as possible. So we thought of two ideas that could be separately implemented or together. So first, one idea is to have the school and the administrators set out like preset routes to certain big places, like to the cafeteria, you'll take a route this way. And if you're going to the gym, you'll take this route. Or if you're going from the cafeteria to this side of the school, you'll go in this route. And so by setting out these routes in advance, we can establish that traffic kind of goes one way, so you're not like clashing into each other, and everything will flow more smoothly. And then we know in Northview, they've actually started letting people go outside the school and like circle around to have dismissed kind of staggered. So we'd have freshmen, then sophomores and juniors or seniors, or vice versa. And it would be a small stagger, like around 1.5 minutes, so that it doesn't create a disruption where like students are waiting outside a classroom, but the students inside haven't yet been dismissed. But if we make it so that it's a bit staggered, we can avoid that initial like flood of students into the hallways that always makes everything crammed in the end. So those were two of our ideas on how we can try to alleviate this problem.
Love that. Great ideas. I love that. I love configuring, because today we don't have routes, and I think that's it came up with COVID a little bit, but I think those are some best practices that could easily stay moving forward. And I love the idea of the staggered, even that 1.5 minute lead time. It's not a lot, but it can make a big difference, And again, I'm not in the education world, so maybe none of this would work, but I love just the thought process about it. I think it's interesting. So nicely done. All right, and I think Tia, you're group 7. I think that was the last of our six groups. So Tia, I think you're the final group. Share.
So our group is talking about how standardized testing has always been used, and how when every student in the United States takes the same test, it doesn't necessarily test what we actually know and our knowledge. So we were thinking that the SAT and ACT, they don't accurately reflect our abilities, because you don't really take a class in school to study what's on the test. You don't really study how to take a test in a very short time period, and you don't study how to take a test for 4 hours long. And we also feel that it also doesn't reflect how you perform, because a lot of students take SAT prep courses, and that's fine, but those courses are very expensive and not everybody has the opportunity to take them. So when colleges look at standardized testing scores, they're not really seeing how students perform in school or how much effort they actually do put into school. So we feel that colleges should look at final grades instead, because when a teacher makes a test, they are making a test based on what they actually taught their students. So their students can perform well, but standardized testing and requiring every kid in the United States to take the same test is not a good idea for us.
Great idea, and I think that's another area that there's been a lot of conflict on that. The testing standards, the testing approaches, those are areas that are constantly being discussed, or at least critiqued in some way or form. And there's been a lot of pushback on the standardized testing model, right? And how do you come up with a testing that's fair? So that's an area that's ripe for innovation also. Very, very ripe for innovation as well. So nicely done. All right, any other group that did not go? I think we got all groups.
Oh, we didn't get to go.
Oh, Archana, I'm so sorry, go ahead.
So we also kind of tackled the lunch situation, and we looked at two different aspects. We looked at the actual food itself, and then we also looked at the kind of environment that's built. So in terms of the actual food, we were thinking of kind of providing both healthy options and kind of what they already have right now. But when it comes to healthy food, we don't really want to just give them a salad, because we know that people would just choose the unhealthy option if that was the case. So we were thinking, we know a lot of restaurants that make supposedly unhealthy food in a healthier way. That could be plant-based protein, or there are a bunch of ideas out there. So making that like healthier option more appealing in that sense would allow people to choose the healthier option more. And then in terms of environment, this has been like a debate for a really long time in terms of like reusable lunch trays, or like how the food is prepared, like what kind of materials are used, and trying to install more environmentally friendly options can not only help with, you know, how much money the school is saving, but also just like in general, it's better for the environment. So, you know, if schools were to use reusable lunch trays, they would save a lot of money on the lunch trays that they actually have to buy that are disposable. And, you know, that keeps a lot of waste from ending up in landfills. So that was our thing.
Very cool. I love that you guys went down an environmental path as well, which I think is always great to look at. Is how can we do things from a better stewardship perspective of our environment. And I think from a health perspective, the food, absolutely, you know, is how do you make it as an attractive option, you know, even the way the food is prepared. And I know that that's been a big debate for a long time as well, but it's not always necessarily the most innovative way, perhaps, right? And that's certainly an opportunity there. So nicely done. All right, well, teams, thank you so much for sharing your ideas and going through your challenge of the process activity there, which is all about using Outsight. And so, you know, when it comes to challenging the process, that we're challenging here is that we've always done it this way. You're not always going to have the solution, right? And I know a lot of you went and actually had a solution, which I think was great. I only gave you 15 minutes to do that. But really, it's sometimes it's just you're just questioning the why. Why are we doing it this way? What is something that we've always done this way? Why is that the case? Is there a better way to do something? And certainly, you know, you all came up with solutions, which I think are great. Now, whether those solutions are doable or not, we don't know. But that's where you would go to that next level, and that's where going through what we said earlier, the small wins. So, for example, Risha, think about, or whoever said the school lunch lines going into the 4 sections. You know, that would be something that you would do in small batches and see how it works. Or maybe you do a test group that does it that way, and a group that's not in that test group. But you start to really identify what's going to be the better outcome. I think, Risha, you talked about the routes around the school, right? So you could practice that. You could try it and see how it works out. So that's the one thing as a leader that you always have the availability, is when a new idea comes around, if it's a solid idea, and there's a good kind of thought process behind it, don't feel that you have to be committed for the long term to that idea. You could always do a trial run of things. And when you do a trial run, what it does is not only, number one, it gives you the opportunity to test it out, certainly, but now people feel listened to and heard. And then secondly, you have an opportunity to see if this is something that's going to really work without having to make a large investment. So you're not committed to something now just because you're testing something out. And as a leader, it gives you the opportunity to really try different things and to see if things work out. Now, you can't always be trying new things out. So as a leader, you have to balance that, right? But you also have to look at sort of what we call the cost-benefit analysis of something, right? Is the effort we're going to put into this change, is the outcome going to be worth the effort we're putting into it? The ease and impact is something else you can look at. How easy is this going to be to implement? And what's the impact going to be? Sometimes you have something that's going to be hard to implement, but the impact's going to be high. And then that's okay. You realize that going in, there's going to be a lot of work, but the impact is going to be well worth it. Sometimes you have something that's easy to implement, but has a low impact. So you might decide not to go that route. So there's all kinds of formulas and processes that you can apply once you have an idea and process to how to actually apply it and what to do. But it all starts with challenging the process and asking ourselves, we've always done it this way. And that brings me back to this behavior here that we talked about before. And behavior number 6 of the LPI, or Leadership Practice Inventory, is when things don't go as expected, I ask, what can we learn from this experience? So mistakes or failures, quote unquote, can be great lessons for challenging the process. When something doesn't go as expected, it can be a great way to learn a new way or a better way of doing things. It's also, the leader, creating an environment where mistakes are okay to be made. Now, the word mistake has a negative connotation to it, doesn't it? Right? When you hear the word mistake, you're like, oh my God, nobody wants to make mistakes. So what if we reframe mistakes and called them learning opportunities? Because that's all they really are. A mistake is a learning opportunity. It's something that we didn't do right, something that didn't go well, but we can learn from that process. And so as leaders, when you are leading something, if you can create an environment where people understand that the mistake is a mistake, sure, but it's a learning opportunity. Because if we treat the mistake as punitive, right, or blame game, then people are not going to be wanting to learn from it or being willing to learn or admit mistakes. But if we can learn from it by calling them learning opportunities, that's where we grow as a leader, and that's where our organizations and our teams grow. So let me give you an example. Had that Frappuccino not worked, what's the worst that would have happened? The worst thing that would have happened if they bought 2 blenders and it just didn't take off the way it did.
The money from the tube that used to buy the 2 blenders is gone.
Not a lot of money. That's the worst that would have happened. You tried something out, you know, because it wasn't like you now bought 2 blenders for every one of your stores across the world. You just bought 2 blenders for this one store. So the worst that would have happened was you were out the cost of 2 blenders. That's it. There's nothing else, right? And so you want to think about that as you try new things is what's the worst that can happen? So when you're making a mistake, it's important to learn from a mistake. And I wouldn't say that that blender not working would have been a mistake, but it would have been something that failed, like an idea that failed. And that's okay too. It's a learning opportunity. So let me give you another example. The can, anybody know this can is called WD-40? WD-40 is a little spray can. It's like a lubricant they use in you know, in different shops and so forth to loosen different things. And so it's called WD-40, and it stands for water displacement 40. The reason why it's called WD-40 is because it took 40 attempts to get the right chemical formula to work for what they were trying to do. This company, the WD-40 company, was trying to solve corrosion that was happening in a robotic arm for, I think it was NASA or one of these, or I think it was for NASA. And the chemist kept trying one formula after another, but it wasn't working. So what's interesting is had they got it done on the first time, that can that we call WD-40 today would be just called WD. If it took them 10 trials to get the right formula mix, it would be called WD-10. But the reason why it's called WD-40 is because it took 39 failed attempts to get that one attempt that worked right. And the CEO of that corporation talks about the fact that in their company, they didn't look at mistakes as mistakes. They called them learning moments or learning opportunities. Because what they did every time they quote unquote failed was they just identified one other way that this wasn't working. But that did not stop them from looking forward and trying to make a success out of it. So that's a great little story. It's a great little example of WD-40 and making things work better. The other example I want to share with you, and I didn't have it on the screen, but I want to share with you is, how many of you by show of hands have ever had an MRI? Have ever had an MRI? You've ever gone through an MRI at the hospital? Anybody out there? Or you've seen or know somebody who's gone through an MRI before? MRI machine. All right, who can tell me in the chat, what do you know about the MRI experience and the process? What's it like for the person going through it? It's very loud. It's very nerve-wracking. What else? What else can you tell me? Scans your brain. And when you're going in the MRI, you probably already have some apprehension, right? Some anxiety. So on top of that, you know, you're in this tube. Maybe you're claustrophobic, right? Maybe that's concerning for you. Table's very cold. So there's a lot going on there in addition to your own emotions going through the fact that you had to get an MRI because maybe they're checking for something, they've discovered something. So there's a lot going on there. And on top of that, just the room itself is cold, it's not inviting, you've got this table, it's very loud and very imposing. So imagine that you're a 7-year-old child and having to go through something like that, how daunting that must be. So one of the engineers at GE who designs MRI machines, he was visiting a hospital where they were implementing one of his newest designs, and he was excited to be there that day to see them using his MRI machine. And at this hospital, when he went to the technician, he wanted to be there to kind of just shadow him for the day and observe the experience. And he was so excited to see his newest technology being unveiled of their MRI machine. And when he talked to the technician that day, and just kind of speaking to the technician said, "Oh, I'm kind of dreading this morning because I have a child coming, and with children, it's a whole different experience." And so he asked, "Well, tell me more about that." He says, "Well, when kids come, they're just extremely scared about the MRI machine. So oftentimes, because you have to sit very, very still, and like Claire said, you can't have anything metal on you. So we often have to sedate the children in order to go through an MRI. So on top of the fact that this is a very scary experience, now you're having to sedate the kids. Think about what this means for the parents, right? Their child is having to be sedated in order to get an MRI machine. Well, here comes this engineer from GE that was all excited about seeing his team's newly released machine in action, and all of a sudden going from a very high emotional moment to a very low moment as he sees those parents and that child walking to the room, and just the fear on the girl's eyes. That caused this GE technician, this engineer, to go back and literally go back in some courses around human-centered design. So he realized that even though he was educated in his field and very competent and very smart, he realized that he doesn't have it all. He doesn't know everything. So his team went back, and it took about a year or more for them to go through this, but they actually went and redesigned the whole MRI experience. So they now have MRI machines that are built around a theme. And the theme basically is anything from like a pirate ship to a cruise to anything like that. They actually designed the MRI machine to look like a pirate ship. All those loud noises that you hear, they actually created a storyline that is narrated during the MRI process, so that, for example, when you hear the loud clanging of the MRI machine, that's simulating the chains going down from the pirate ship as they let the anchors down to the ocean floor. The technician then basically reads the story to the child going to the MRI, as they're part of this story of being in this pirate ship searching for lost treasure. And at the end of the MRI scan, the child gets to go to a treasure box that they've made look like an old treasure chest and pick out a reward or gift or a toy. So think about what that does for this child. Instead of this cold, imposing room, it's a beautiful room that they've decorated very nicely with a whole theme and motif around a pirate ship and the whole storyline that goes into that. And because of that, now they have over 6 or 7 different themes like that. They have like a jungle theme, a zoo, things like that. Did they have to do that? No, they didn't have to do that. Because at the end of the day, the machine was doing what it's always done, which is taking scans. But they elevated the experience for these kids in that process. So what do you think about that story, that example I just shared with you? What are some lessons learned there for you when you think about that situation, that experience that I just shared? Yeah, there's definitely a cost in there, right? And a great example of that, absolutely. Simple solution worked, and it was thinking about your end user. So they were thinking about what does this product do and what does it need to do, and it's doing its result. But we weren't thinking about the end user, and that also is helpful when you're challenging the processes. Think about the people that you're solving for. Think about the people that you're trying to build something for or do something for. So as you think about the projects that you're involved in, even in school, is always think about the end user. Think about that experience as well. Oftentimes we think we know what the right solution is, but we're thinking about it from our perspective as opposed to the end user perspective. And that can change our whole design and our whole approach. All right, nicely done. So let's go into our last 2 modules for our session today. These 2 modules, I often teach them together because they are literally correlated. Enable others to act and encourage the heart. So somebody read for me under enable others to act, that first one, foster collaboration.
Foster collaboration by building trust and facilitating relationships.
Okay, all right. And then somebody read that second one for me.
Strengthen others by increasing self-determination and developing competence.
Okay, thank you. So these are 2 commitments that you make as a leader. One is that you as a leader make a commitment to foster collaboration. As a leader, it is our job to help build relationships and to drive trust within the people that we're leading and that are working together. A second part of that enabling others to that commitment is strengthening others, which means that we're helping people to develop their own competencies, to become better. I like to say this as leave people better off than you found them. So you are leading to the group, but you're also leading to the individual. So when you're leading a team, you want to be thinking about how's my team working together? How are they building trust, and how am I making sure those relationships are working well within my team? But I never want to forget the individuals within the team. So I'm leading the team, but I'm also leading individually. So it's a one-to-many relationship, and it's a one-to-one. And I always want to be thinking about that as a leader. And to use a sports analogy, right? Think about coaches and teams. They're coaching the entire team, but they're also very acutely aware of each player on that team and what that team individual's strengths are and their opportunities and how we can make them perform better. There are 6 behaviors to the leadership practices inventory. I want you to take just one and tell me as well.
Something that stands out to me from this is providing opportunities for others to take on leadership. And I think that's really important because as a leader, or while you're leading something, you don't always have to be in charge of everything, and not everything has to be your responsibility. Allowing other people to show their opinions or take charge of something is very helpful in moving along the process.
Very well said. Absolutely. Anybody else? Any others that stand out to you?
The last one also stood out to me. I support the decisions that other people make on their own. So I feel like a part of being a leader is you have to allow others to take charge as well. And that just facilitates discussions and allows for the team to be better as a whole.
Absolutely. Good. All right, we've got time for one more. And Nishant, that's actually my favorite one that you just selected there. It's my favorite one of all the behaviors. There's 30 behaviors across the leadership inventory. That's actually one of my favorite behaviors because it is an action. And listening to me is one of the best gifts that you can give to the people that you lead. And so I love that one. And I absolutely agree. It lets people know that you're open to them, that you're empowering to them as a leader. And gain knowledge. It helps you as a leader when you are listening to others. And then this is my favorite quote when it comes to listening. As a leader, you're a leader for a reason. You have competencies that you bring to the table. You've been elected or selected as a leader, and you've been chosen as the leader in a role, and that's great. And there's a value to that. But at the same time, part of our job, a big part of our job as a leader, is to listen because we don't have all the answers. We can't be all places at once, right? And so it's about trusting your team and trusting the people around you that they're going to have your best interest of you and the team in mind. And so being a leader that constantly listens is key to enabling others to act. Part of that and what you're doing, though, is you're building trust. In order for people to really feel listened to, they have to feel trust. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you back in the breakout groups again this time. This time, we're only going to take about 10 minutes because this should be a pretty easy activity to do. But here's what you're going to do. And you don't have a formal worksheet, so somebody may want to just sketch this out. So I'm going to get my ambassadors to go ahead and get us ready to go back in the breakout groups. There may be a way to recreate the breakouts where it's the same groups as before. If it's easier, that's fine as well. But here's what you're going to do is think about somebody that you trust and think about somebody you don't trust. Now, you may not all have the same person in mind, and that's okay. But think about somebody you've trusted and think about somebody you don't trust. And what I want you to do in positive column, think about what traits did they display. In other words, what makes them a trusted person? You know, or what made them a non-trusted person? What were some of the traits that they exhibited that made you not trust that person? And under effects is think about what effect that had on you or on others. And it could be a personal example. It could be something broader. But think about not only the traits that they displayed, but also what the effect of that was. How did that have impact to either you or others that person was around, right? So trusted example positive, and somebody who you did not trust. And again, what those traits were and what those effects. Before we get into our breakout groups here for about 10 minutes, what questions do you have? All right, so ambassadors, are we ready to put everybody back in breakouts? All right, and it's going to be a quick one. I know this is 15 minutes, but let's just take 10. We'll be back at 10:30 to wrap up the section of
up, so they should be. Do you guys see an invite? Okay,
Yep.
Sounds good.
All right, so everyone make sure you select the invite, accept it. Perfect. Thank you, ambassadors, for setting that up. All right, looks like everybody's almost back here. Okay, excellent. Well, welcome back, everyone. So as we wrap up this section, enabling others to act is all about empowerment. It's all about delegating as well, but it starts with trust, because if you don't trust somebody, it's going to be very hard to feel that you can empower them, right? And when you empower them, the trust goes two ways. You've got to trust them, but they've got to also trust you that you have their best interest in mind. And so when you talk about enabling others to act and empowering others, it is the foundation of trust. In fact, they say that somebody has said before that trust is like the currency of relationships. Trust is like the currency of relationships. So without trust, a relationship really is going to be very frail and not very in depth. So I'd love to hear from somebody or one group. We don't have to have all the groups share, but somebody give me an example of some of the traits of somebody that you've trusted in the past or that you have high trust for. What were some examples of traits that that person or that organization displayed that you felt you trusted? Anybody want to take that one? Okay, Ava, go ahead.
Some traits that made them like trusted were that they had like open communication and that they were honest to me.
Okay, so open and honest. Anybody else want to add to that list? Go ahead.
Maybe you're able to share your ideas with them, and it's like a mutual relationship with them where you're able to listen to what they have to say and they're able to listen to what you have to say.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Nisha. Anybody else want to add to this list? Okay, Nicholas, go ahead.
You can trust their opinions and worldviews based off of their experiences.
Based off of their experiences, okay. Which means that they were sharing and they were open as well, right? Which goes a long way. All right. All right, what about the next one? What about somebody that did not trust? You know, what were some things that, some of the traits that they exhibited that didn't allow you to trust that person?
Maybe
Okay, so arrogant. Go ahead.
one of them could be like they had pretty poor communication and started like talking about themselves before.
Okay, good. I see stubborn coming up there as well. Anybody else want to add to that list? Things that, and think of again, somebody you've not trusted or maybe that's broken your trust. What were some of the character traits or traits that they displayed? Not open to ideas. They broke trust. Okay, excellent. So now I want to go back to somebody that you trusted. What effect did that have? What were some of the positive effects that came out of that experience? Anybody care to share for that one? Any group? Okay, Yuta, go ahead. Thanks for raising your hand.
The effects include like stronger bonds between you and that person and longer lasting relationships overall. And there's talk.
All right, anybody else? Thank you. Want to grow their connection, so the relationship is deepened as well because of that trust, which is all what we all want. Absolutely. All right, and anybody under that did not trust. So think about
you can tell that they have poor communication or are stubborn, then you'll have this preconceived notion that even if they do offer positive ideas or good ideas, that even still you won't really want to accept that because you know what they're already like.
yeah, so their past and what they've done has now affected any possibility in the future. So there's almost like you're starting from a deficit in a way when somebody has broken trust or the trust is not there. I love things mentioning, yeah, you know, with stress, you feel negative, so you walk away impacted as a result of that. So the reason why I do this activity is because it shows the power of trust, you know, and that is really the foundation for people to really feel that they can be enabled to act or empowered, which is really critical as a leader to focus on. Is you know, how do people trust? Do people trust? That is really key as we think about enabling others to act. And then that brings about encouraging the heart. Let me just clear the annotations here. So when we encourage the heart, which by the way is tied to enabling others to act, they're really tied together, because when you enable somebody to act, you actually encourage their heart. They're tied together, and it also works the opposite way. When I encourage somebody, when people feel valued, they feel recognized for their contributions, or they feel that their values are celebrated, they're going to be much more likely to be empowered also, to be enabled to act. So as a leader, never forget that these last two practices we're talking about are really linked together. And they're not in any kind of order. For some people, you've got to encourage them first before they feel enabled to act. And for others, you have to enable them to act in order for them to feel encouraged. But the only way that you can know that is by getting to know the person at an individual level. So for example, if you want me to perform, for me personally, if you are leading me and you want me to feel empowered, I don't feel empowered if I first don't feel valued. For other people, when you empower them, by correlation, they now feel valued. So knowing that is important. That's where, going back to the definition of leadership before, leadership is an art more than a science. And because it's an art, it takes different types. It's different kinds. It's knowing the people that you lead, knowing what makes people tick. How do you motivate people? And so on the screen here are the behaviors that you already have. When you did the LPI self-assessment earlier this year, or last year rather, you basically gave yourself a rating on these 6 behaviors as well. How often do you encourage others as they work on activities and programs? How often do you express appreciation for the contributions people make? Do you praise people for a job well done? Do you find ways to celebrate accomplishments? So think about in your groups that you're in today, in your project groups, make sure you find ways to celebrate accomplishments. That also goes a long way in encouraging the heart. Now, when encouraging the heart, the reason why it's important, I love this quote here by David Campbell: without ceremonies, there are no beginnings, no endings. Life becomes an endless series of Wednesdays. So when you're busy day in and day out working on things, heads down working on things, as a leader, it's important to stop, take a little break, celebrate, recognize people. Even if you're not at the end goal of what you're trying to accomplish, that's okay. There's always something to celebrate. There's always something to recognize as you work on your tasks and products and processes. And there's some standards here. There's some essentials of encouraging the heart that I want to leave you with. First, we have to clear standards. People have to know exactly what are the standards for the type of behavior that's going to be rewarded. So it can't be this moving thing. People have to know that there's clarity about the standards you have. You also want to expect the best. So we're not celebrating mediocrity. This is not a participation trophy where everybody gets a trophy. Nothing wrong with everybody getting celebrated, but you do expect the best, which means there are levels of rewards. If somebody does the absolute best, their reward's going to be better. But even somebody who's doing exactly what's expected should also get some recognition because they're showing up, they're doing what's expected, and there's value there as well. You also want to personalize recognition, which means you get to know people at an individual level. Some people like a pat on the back. Some people like a gift certificate or some kind of certificate of recognition. Some people like simply a note of acknowledgement. Some people like a verbal encouragement. There's a book out there called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And it's a great book to look at, is that people like to be recognized differently. And by personalizing it, you're letting them know that you're listening to them and that you're valuing them. We also want to create a spirit of community. So making sure that when you celebrate, that it's across the team so that it's everybody celebrating. It's not just celebrating one person, but you're looking at a spirit of community so everybody feels involved. And then speaking of involvement, being personally involved. When you're leading anything, make sure that you are personally involved in recognition. So you don't want to delegate recognition to someone else. We talked about leadership earlier and delegating leader responsibilities. This is one that you should hold on to for yourself. You should model it in such a way that others do it also, but it's one that you should definitely do yourself. So I'm not going to go into this activity full range here because we're getting close to our time here, but I want you to think about in the different groups that you're a part of right now, think about 1 or 2 people that you haven't recognized, either never or recently, and think about some ideas that you might have to recognize them. Maybe it's sending them a note, maybe it's sending them a text. By the way, one thing I love nowadays is recording a video on my phone and sending it to the person, right? It's an easy way, especially in this virtual environment, for people to feel more connected. Maybe it's sending somebody a gift card. This morning while we were on the cell, I remembered that one of my colleagues has a doctor's appointment today, and she's got a webinar at noon that she can't cover. So I reached out and said, hey, I remember you have this webinar, I'll take it. And guess what? She didn't have to do that, but she just sent me a gift card for Starbucks. You know, and she knows I'm facilitating this program for you all. And she sent it to me. She didn't need to do that, but that makes me feel valued as a team member, right? That she recognized the efforts here of me going into another webinar here in just a little bit. But think about what you will do this week to help somebody feel recognized and valued. Okay, that's your takeaway. So with your LPI, as you think about activating your leadership moving forward, you've now been to the second part of this program. In the first part, we talked about modeling the way and inspiring the shared vision. And now today we've talked about challenging the process, which is all about innovation. We've talked about enabling others to act, and we've talked about encouraging the heart. We've talked now about 5 practices of leadership. And so think about which practice and which behavior are you going to take action on to continue to develop your leadership. And part of the challenge I have for you is to choose somebody that you can share your action plan with. Choose somebody that you can share what you're planning to work on as a leader to develop your leadership. That'll help you to become more accountable to this process. And here are the 5 practices. Model the way, inspire shared vision, challenging the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. Feel free to take a screen share of this screen if you'd like. Take screen capture if you're able to do that. And this is a great way to maybe reflect back on these practices and which one do you want to focus on as you develop your leadership continually. I hope that you'll use the Leadership Challenge framework in every scope of your life. I hope you'll find that this is relevant in your personal life at home with your families, but also as you continue to grow in your career as a student and eventually in your career as a profession. These are 5 practices that will make you more effective as a leader, no matter which part of your life you apply them to. So I want to leave you with your group assignment for next time, which is called Leadership in the Movies. So in your project groups, not the ones that we did breakouts with today, but in your project groups, you know the groups that you're working for your next program day, which is on February the 10th. And Irene, just correct me if I'm wrong, it's February the 10th, I think from 12 to 4. Each of you is going to create a 3 to 5 minute presentation, and you'll get an email follow-up with more details here. You're going to need to select a movie clip that highlights a leadership theme. Now, the leadership theme that you're going to do in your presentation needs to include the following. Why did you choose that scene? What did you learn from it? It's either a leadership principle that's clearly defined or one that's lacking. Who was the leader and why? What leadership skills were demonstrated? What techniques did they use? What was leaders' communication style and why? What lessons can you take away? And most importantly, how will you use these skills? By the way, I'd love to see in these presentations, and I'll be facilitating this program for you on the 10th, I want to see some of these leadership challenge principles we've talked about today. You know, maybe model the way or inspire shared vision or challenge the process. See these behaviors and how did you see those practices? Now, really important, your selected clip must be sent to Ms. Sanders before the program day so she can upload those and review those. We need to make sure that these clips have no kind of profanity, that they meet the student code of conduct. So very important. Your presentation can't be longer than 5 minutes, so we need to keep these brief presentations. And that presentation will be on February the 10th from 12 to 4. Irene, anything else to share there on the Leadership in the Movies assignment?
You guys are going to have to work with your groups. So the group that you're in is the group that you're going to work on this. And be creative with the